Part 2. We left off on my favorite Friday the 13th film, Part 6, which leads me to Part 7, which could have become my favorite one if it was allowed to be the film that was supposed to be. According to the director, these exact words, "Ratings board raped my movie." That's his exact quote. And they did. John Carl Buechler was the director of Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. And he was a special effects guy. So, therefore, he could bring a lot of interesting and new stuff to the film. And honestly, as far as the direction goes, it's a good film. The effects, what you see of them, are pretty cool, but you can tell it's been edited to appease the ratings board. And honestly, I think if the film had been what it was supposed to be, it'd be my favorite, but it's just too clear that too much was cut. Not the editor's fault, just doing his job, because, like I said, they were just trying to appease the ratings boards, who just went completely brutal with this film for some reason. They were always brutal with Friday the 13th, but Part 7, I guess 7 times was it too much for them. I'm gonna turn the volume down. I got the soundtrack playing just to provide some background music, but I think I have it a little too loud. But yeah, Part 7, I think it is worth a watch for 2 reasons. The main character, Tina, she's very, very good opponent for Jason. She has psychic abilities, and boy, does she use them in the end to fight Jason. Jason also has a change in this film, whereas they would do a different actor as Jason each film, and, very different Jasons, varying degrees on how good they were. 7 had the most identifiable actor / stuntman to play Jason, Kane Hodder. And Kane Hodder is very good at playing pissed off. Jason is supposed to be perpetually pissed off, so Kane was perfect for this role. And you can tell in this film, it's really great performance. He's, can play quiet anger very well. And the scenes where Jason's unmasked, the makeup effects, and the fact that you can see at least, one eye, and the emotion Kane's able to get through that makeup is amazing. So 7 is worth the watch, though I really do think that the MPAA really hurt the film. But there's not much they could do, and I know Buechler and a lot of the fans wish that there could be an unrated cut of the film, but Paramount didn't care enough to take care of the prints, so we can never have it because the prints are gone. So we're stuck with what we got, but at least what we got has some good stuff, so it's definitely, Part 7's worth the watch. If nothing else, Kane Hodder, what you can see of the effects, and like I said, Tina's a pretty good character. Before I move to Part 8, I will say the bitchy character in Part 7 the actress makes her character so bitchy that when she dies, you are cheering. And once again, it's one of those things that was like, they know who they're making this movie for, and it's, once again, this film could have been the best. I think if the MPAA hadn't been assholes about it, it would have been number 1 on a lot of lists. Oh well. Bad news is, even though it's the beginning of the Kane Hodder era of Jason, you get the best Jason, but the films just keep going downhill from here. I think 6 was kind of like, a return to form. 7 was still kind of okay, yeah, good. But from here on out, it's going to be like, what the hell were they thinking? Jason Takes Manhattan, Part 8, the last of the Paramount Friday the 13th films. And it's whew. Let me put it this way. If it really was Jason Takes Manhattan, I think it would have done a lot better. I think fans would receive it a lot more. And I know there are fans for Part 8 that, like, oh, it's good, and it has its moments. Most of them are when it's actually in Manhattan, but for budget reasons, they didn't really film much in Manhattan. 2/3 of the film is on a boat. Jason on a boat, which is interesting, and it is kind of claustrophobic. It kind of brings back that feel from Alien, where your main characters are trapped with this monster on this tight, compressed, claustrophobic area. So there's that, but they don't really play to that as much as they could have, which would have made them not being in New York as much a little more forgivable. But what we get, is not bad. Once again, Kane Hodder's back as Jason. He's the first guy to come back to play Jason. Everyone else kind of either said no or wasn't asked. So, but Kane's like, he heard that they were gonna look into getting someone else. He's like, no, I'm willing to do it. I'll do the part. And they're like, oh, we didn't think you wanted to do it. But Kane's like, you nuts? And so they got Kane back, and he's kind of what keeps me going through this film sometimes. The director, Rob Hedden, seems like a nice guy, and like I said, he originally wanted to do 90% of the film in New York, but financially he wasn't really allowed to do that. Once again, I wish they could have done more something akin to Alien with, the boat thing, because I think it could work, because of that tight compressed area with Jason. But they didn't really play it out too much. The casting's okay. No real complaints on casting. I gotta say, when they actually get to New York, the film is, kind of like, okay, yeah, this is more what I was expecting. Jason in the big city in New York. Most of it was shot in Vancouver, except for excuse me, except for Times Square. That they really did that in Times Square, which is one of Kane Hodder's favorite moments as the character, because seriously, Jason in the middle of Times Square, that's so trippy, and I mean, I wish I could have been there for that. That would have been cool to see, in person, because a lot of people did see that in person, It also has some of the funniest moments in the series, like I said, most of it takes place in New York. Basically, all the good stuff basically is in New York, while okay stuff happens before it. But when you get to New York, some of the silliest, but sometimes some of the coolest stuff happens in New York. I don't want to say too much because, I do want people to kind of check these films out and kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. But there is one thing I'm going to go ahead and tell you. The unmasking is disappointing. Jason's demise is disappointing and it's just weird. It's explainable, but it's a headache to explain. And you have to buy into you have to kind of bullshit to try and logically explain what happens in the end. Just know that Jason it's to where Jason technically probably couldn't come back, at all. But they still managed to do it because there is a few more sequels after this one. But this was the final Paramount Friday the 13th film. At this point, they felt that, the films were starting to, used to, they could make the Friday the 13th films cheap and make a lot of money off them, allowing them to put that money in towards the next film. But the films started making less and less money, and as with any movie studio, the less money the film makes, the less interest in a sequel there is. So, when Sean Cunningham, the director of the original film, he owned right, he still owned the rights to Friday the 13th, at least to a degree to where, you know, he had a say, but not a full say. He bought the rights out and went to New Line and started doing films with New Line. New Line happened to be the studio that Freddy built. I mean, it really is, that is New Line's motto. It is the house that Freddy built, because Nightmare on Elm Street pretty much made that company. It started off as, just a production company that, distributed some, cult films, some of which got popular, but they didn't really have anything substantial until Nightmare on Elm Street. So you can imagine people's minds, turning when, wait a minute, the company that owns Freddy now owns Jason. I know what this means. They were somewhat wrong, though. It would be about a decade before anything actually happened with that, but we did get Jason Goes to Hell before anything else happened. Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. Sean Cunningham wanted to make Jason's debut at his new home unique, interesting, something that will get the fans really going. So he got a friend of his son's who was an up-and-coming young man who was, trying to get into film, named Adam Marcus. Adam Marcus and company were brought in by Sean to try and inject some youth and something new and interesting, something that hadn't been done before with Friday the 13th. They definitely did that. Whether it was a good idea or not depends on your own personal opinions on the matter, because, well, let's see. Jason, they don't even really explain how he's back from Part 8. Partially, I think it's because of rights, because Part 8 was made by Paramount, so they probably couldn't borrow too much from Part 8 anyway. So, but partially, I think it's just like, you know what? No one cares. They just want Jason. They just want the film to start. They don't care if continuity be damned. These films never really follow continuity that well. So, but Jason somehow has a body again, is back, and he's stalking the woods again. And he gets blown up in the first 5 minutes. That's why I didn't say spoilers, because it's happening right at the beginning of the film. Is it really spoilers if it happens right at the beginning? And it's something, I mean, you have to remember, these films are like over 20 years old now. It's kind of hard to say spoilers for these films, especially controversial one, because that's something fans complain about all the time. You ask a Friday the 13th fan about Part 9, unless they actually liked Part 9, they're going to be like, they fucking killed Jason in the first 5 minutes. They blew him up. He's hardly in the film for the rest of the time. It's like, personally, I'm not a hardcore Friday the 13th fan. I mean, my friends would be like, you kind of are. And I'm like, no, I've seen the hardcore fans. No, I'm definitely not hardcore. I can tolerate Part 9 because they did do what they set out to do. It was very different from what we'd seen before. They did have touches of the formula, Friday the 13th formula, but they were kind of making fun of it at the same time. They poke a little fun at the formula and the conventions, but Part 9 was, well, I mean, as I said, Jason's blown up in the first 5 minutes, but apparently he's, a cursed, damned creature of some kind. And so he can't really be killed by conventional means. Obviously, we have 8 films to confirm. Yeah, Jason doesn't die easy. But instead of just, automatically, here I am, back again, like he did at the beginning of this film, no explanation or anything, they actually have an explanation this time for how he continues his rampage. Apparently, his heart can possess a man to eat it and pretty much be taken over by the spirit of Jason. Does that make any sense? Hell no, but, we have entered a fantasy horror film now. It's not sci-fi. It's not even going for slight realism. I mean, by part 6, we've pretty much given up on reality. But boy, this is like, you know what? We're not even going to come close to reality now. We're in full fantasy mode. So, the coroner for Jason's corpse is compelled by Jason's heart to eat it. And so he is possessed by Jason. However, Jason cannot possess a human body long before it just craps out on him, almost literally. So he has to switch from host to host until he finds a family member. He can transfer his spirit into a blood family member of another Voorhees. He'll regain, the form he had. So he starts looking for his long-lost sister that we don't really know anything, never heard of, that did not exist until this movie. But he has a sister and a niece. And apparently a great niece, too. Because his niece is a new mother. So there's 3 generations of Voorhees for him to try and possess, and he's going to try and do it. However, the baby daddy finds out and does everything he can to save his, sort of family. I mean, he didn't marry his sweetheart. She dumped his ass before he even knew she was pregnant. And everyone thinks the baby daddy's crazy, except for a character that's kind of the Van Helsing in this film, Creighton Duke. Creighton Duke is played by Stephen Williamson from the TV show 21 Jump Street. And Creighton Duke is a very fucked up, but a very entertaining character who is kind of insane, but he is the only one that kind of knows what the hell's going on with this supernatural stuff with Jason. So he kind of tortures / advises the hero and is the only one who really believes him. But it gets to a point where it becomes clear that, yes, Jason is going around possessing people and trying to possess his niece. So his niece teams up with her baby daddy to protect the baby and try and kill Jason once and for all. Fortunately, they protect the baby, but Jason manages to find a family member, doesn't necessarily have to be a living family member, to, possess, and he's back in full form, only to once again be defeated. And seems like a happy ending, but it's not really the ending. One of the best horror film endings ever happens to be in one of the most controversial Friday the 13th films. I know I just said that I really don't care too much about spoilers for films that are over 20 years old, but the ending to the ending to Jason Goes to Hell is just, it's actually worth the torture of watching. And I actually like this film. I don't love it. I just like it, but it is kind of torture if you just want a typical Friday the 13th film. If you were hoping for something to be different, it delivers. There are some great moments. Kane tried to work with the actors who were being possessed by Jason to, kind of move like Jason, and some were open to working with him and doing like he would suggest because he had very strong opinions on the character, obviously, having played the character twice now, and technically 3 times in this film, though he's hardly in it. But there are some actors who you can tell they're trying to do like Kane's suggestions, and then there's others who clearly just did not care for Kane's opinions on the character. But still, Kane Hodder does play Jason in this film at least twice, at the beginning and the very end, and those scenes are awesome. Kane's definitely top of his game. Great ending. So I will say, if nothing else, watch it for the ending. It's pretty worth it, even though the payoff is debatable, because the payoff And I'm doing this not in order of the film's releases, but in the chronological order of the films. Like, they take, like, you know. So basically, I'm not doing Jason X next. Because it takes place after Freddy vs. Jason. So I'm doing Jason X after Freddy vs. Jason. Freddy vs. Jason, for what it went through to get made, it is a miracle that it's as decent as it is. It should have, considering what it went through, it should have been a lot worse than it was. It was a lot better than Batman v Superman. A lot better. However, that's not saying much. Pretty much, Freddy vs. Jason, the best way to sum it up is when it actually lives up to its title. Oh my god, it is awesome. If you're a gorehound or you just love watching, you know, supernatural beings beat the living snot out of each other, and I do, this film is awesome. At least for, you know, two, you know, parts of the film, it's everything you want. But it takes a bit to get there. You know, both in their respective franchises, Freddy and Jason are kind of in a purgatory hell-like state. Freddy is not happy with that, so he wants to find a way to get out of his situation. Well, his power comes from the children of Springwood. By children, we mean, of course, teenagers, because, you know, technically they're still kids. I don't know. They're just trying to appeal to teenagers, so children's going to translate to teenager just so we can get that teenage audience. Okay. So Freddy has an idea. He can't really do anything until they start fearing him again. So what if someone who could move about without needing fear, put some fear into them? Hence, he tricks Jason into, you know, going to Springwood to, you know, start creating fear and confusion and get people thinking, is Freddy back? Because that's all he needs to start doing what he does best. And it works a little too well because, yes, Freddy's starting to get power again. He's starting to be able to stalk dreams, but just before he can kill his victims, Jason gets to them first. And Freddy doesn't like that. He likes to kill. Freddy likes his work. And so that's how the conflict really starts. Jason's killing off Freddy's victims before Freddy can do it. Freddy's pissed, so Freddy's trying to get him to stop. And Jason, of course, has no intention of stopping once he started. So that's how they get their big fight. Who wins? Honestly, it's left up for debate, so watch it and decide for yourself. Personally, I think it's pretty much, you know, a tie, in my opinion. But, you know, some people say, oh, Jason won, and some people say Freddy won. And, you know, thanks to alternate endings, there's also, you know, well, in the alternate ending, this one won. And it's like, okay. But, yeah, Freddy vs. Jason, when they actually are Freddy vs. Jason, awesome. The rest of the film is kind of like Dawson's Creek, the horror edition. Yeah, I never watched Dawson's Creek, so there you go. And then that kind of sums up my feelings for the rest of the film. Basically, if they just cut everything out and just had it the Freddy versus Jason stuff, perfect, cut. Okay, now we'll get to Jason X. Okay, Freddy vs. Jason took forever to make. It was in development hell, ironically, much like the characters. So, while they're waiting for Freddy vs. Jason to get made, Sean Cunningham's worried that, you know, if they wait too long to do a film, people are just not going to care about Jason anymore. So he's like, well, we need to keep the character fresh in the minds. We need to do something to kind of keep people, you know, reinvigorated before Freddy vs. Jason comes out. But how do you do that without messing up Freddy vs. Jason? Set it in the future with Jason X. Evil gets an upgrade. Pretty much. That's a pretty good little tagline because it sums it up. Basically, in the some not too distant future, Jason's supposed to be frozen, cryogenically frozen. Since they can't kill him, they'll just freeze him. So while he's not dead, he can't do anything. But of course, some government assholes like, we need to study him, so we're not going to freeze him. Jason escapes, and he manages to actually get frozen regardless, but not without taking out a bunch of people first. Cut to the far future where they find him, and not knowing what they have there, they bring him aboard. He unfreezes and seems to revive. At the same time, sex is going on the ship because, you know, teenagers fucking. Jason's going to have to do something about that. And wakes up, does what he does, and then he gets his ass kicked by an android who stupidly kicks him into a machine that restores body parts. We get Uber Jason, which is pretty freaking looks just so awesome. I love the look of Uber Jason. Uber Jason has a great look. Love it. And honestly, kind of sad they didn't do it earlier in the film because it's just brutally so cool. And, well, I've kind of run out of good things to say about the film. They tried, when they made the film, it was cutting edge. However, the film got released 2 years after it was made. So what would have been cutting edge effects looked ridiculously dated by the time it was released. However, I would like to point out that even if they did release it when they made it, yeah, it would have been cool and new and special, you know, when it was released, and, you know, it's like, oh, that's great. But then 2 years later, when it's like on DVD and stuff, it would still end up looking dated in the future no matter what. So honestly, that complaint that, oh, if it had been released when it was made, yeah, it would have been new and cool looking then for like about 5 months, and then it would look silly and dated. So that was going to happen regardless. The script changed every other week, apparently. I feel bad for the screenwriter because not only did he have to rewrite his own script, but he actually played in the film, and he comes in to work on the film as an actor, and he finds out about his 50 different changes to his script, and he's like, this isn't what I wrote. What the hell's going on? Basically, you know, it was a mess. And when you watch the film, you can tell. Jason X has a reputation of being one of those so bad it's good films. It has its moments where it's actually pretty good. Mostly Uber Jason. But the fight between Jason and the android is pretty awesome. So I recommend Jason X for the android fight and Uber Jason. Yeah. By the way, I didn't mention this when I was talking about Freddy vs. Jason, but Jason X was made before Freddy vs. Jason and was the last official Friday the 13th film with Kane Hodder as Jason. Because when they did Freddy vs. Jason in 2003, everybody was thinking Kane was going to come back as Jason, Robert Englund was going to come back as Freddy, and, you know, that was what was expected. And it's still kind of debated on who decided this, but someone decided that Kane wasn't right for the part of Jason. Even though, according to the fans, he is Jason. According to Kane, he is Jason. And while Kane has a reputation for being a sweet guy, the reason he's so sweet is because he gets all of his aggression out as Jason. So I really wouldn't want to be the person who made that decision and run into Kane anytime soon, because he is a very intimidating looking guy. outside of the makeup and stuff. He looks like he could actually pop your head off with no issues whatsoever, even though, from what I understand, he wouldn't, but he could. So, but fans and Kane were very ticked off that, what's basically, the ultimate Friday the 13th film for Jason, and you don't really have Jason in it. Ken Kersinger does a good job of what he is asked to do in the film, but that's part of the problem. What he's asked to do in the film kind of is against what has been established. The screenwriters, because we're dealing with Freddy, we have to deal with Jason's mind and subconscious, what is going on in Jason's head, and that includes his fears. What does Jason fear? Not water. And the writers knew that. They wanted it. They were trying to say Jason does have a fear of drowning because that's how he originally died. But in the film, it looks like Jason's afraid of water, which is stupid. It's stupid. But once again, that was a pretty good example of what was done wrong in that film. Once again, nothing against Ken Kersinger. He was told he had a job he was told to do. He did what he was asked to very well. But that might have been another reason why they didn't get Kane, because Kane, Kane knows Jason in and out. He has strong opinions on it. And while he's not like, if you don't do Jason my way, I walk. It's not like that. But it is sort of like, Jason wouldn't do that. Why are you having him? No, Jason's not scared of water. He lives in water. See, those are the kind of things Kane would say, and not be afraid to say it, He would be pretty much very forthcoming, like, this is what the fans want. This is what they're used to. This is how the character works. And that might be why they didn't want Kane. They probably were thinking he would, not let them go the direction they're wanting to go, which, kind of hurt the film, in the end for a lot of fans. A lot of Jason fans were like, what the hell was up with that? Like myself, I'm very much, like, why did they do that? Even the screenwriters had their heads scratching about that whole, afraid of water bit. Like, that made no sense. And even the writers are like, that's not how we wrote it. We wrote it to where it's a bit more clear that it's drowning he's weirded out by. And even then, it's the memory of drowning, not actually drowning itself. But there you go. But yeah, so we're, after Jason X, Kane Hodder's gone, unwillingly. He would later play a somewhat similar character in the Hatchet films. I haven't had a chance to see them yet. They look awesome. Can't wait to try it out. The maker of those films, Adam Green, he's a huge Friday the 13th fan, and so from what I understand, those films are clearly made out of love for the Friday the 13th films and their style and the way they're done. And, of course, having Kane Hodder play the main, slasher. Well, I mean, yeah. So I do want to check that out. I hear good things. But there is one more film, the final, for now, film, even though it looks like there is a chance there may be future films now, but for a time not too long ago, it looked like the end of Friday the 13th. But here it is, 2009 Friday the 13th, the reboots. And normally I'm very skeptical of reboots. A lot of times I'm proven right in thinking that they're going to be total crap, because very rarely, at least today, remakes are not done very well. There was a time in the 80s where they did some very interesting and entertaining remakes of films. I don't know why in the 80s they were able to get it right, but in modern day they very rarely are. But Friday the 13th's remake or reboot or whatever the fuck you want to call it, because they keep changing the name. Just pick one already. But reimagining of Friday the 13th, what they do is they take parts 2, 3, and 4 and kind of mix them together with a touch of part 1. And it's kind of your typical slasher film. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a, if you liked the Friday the 13th films, particularly the early ones, you'll probably like this one. I have the Blu-ray killer cut, so it's the full version as far as, it can be. And honestly, when I watched it, the best way to sum it up, it was a romp in familiar territory. It was sort of like, I liked it. I wasn't like, oh my God, this is great. They actually did it right this time. It's more like, considering what it could have been, pretty good. Yeah, I mean, if you're not really into the Friday the 13th formula, you're not even going to come close to this film, let alone any of the others anyway. But if, you kind of want, your, Jason stalking the woods and killing teenagers and doing it in creative, interesting ways, this film delivers. No complaints. I like that they do try and do things a little differently. They add a little bit more pathos to Jason that you only get hints of in the previous films. Here they really try and dive deep without having like Jason talk or anything. It's just, a lot more focuses on the psychosis of Jason. Like, you really see how he thinks without him having to say a word. And Derek Mears, who they got to play him, did a great job. Part of his inspiration, he said, was kind of a mixture of there was a little bit of Rambo. And when he says Rambo, I'm not talking Rambo's 2 and 3 where it's like machine guns and stuff. No, this is like First Blood, their first Rambo movie, the really cool one where we see Rambo really do the guerrilla-style war tactics, and that's kind of what Jason's kind of doing is, he sets up traps. He's clever. He thinks things through. He's not some lumbering giant just going around killing teens. He's actually trapping, plotting, and capturing and taking them out in these really creative ways that's just like something you haven't really seen before to this degree, except in, the first Rambo movie. Only this time it's Jason Voorhees, and unlike Rambo, Jason has no problem killing civilians at all. So that was the Friday 13th series. I'm feeling a lot better than I did yesterday when I made the first video. I'm even thinking about maybe redoing that someday, but not anytime soon. I'm kind of lazy. It's a miracle I even started these, the 2 videos I've done. I may, this very night, do another review of a franchise, preferably one a little smaller, so I can do it all in one video, but if not, I'll probably do it later in the week. So this has been Johnny's reviews of Friday 13th, the movie series. I'm not watching the TV show. I've been told it's actually pretty good. I'll take their word for it, but I just am not in the mood to watch 3 seasons of, a TV show that doesn't really have anything to do with the movies. But like I said, I have heard good things about the show, so I'm not going to knock it. Apparently it is a good show if you kind of like Supernatural or Buffy or, those kind of shows. This was kind of like a precursor to those kind of shows where you have, a supernatural, TV show going on where the main characters deal with a different supernatural threat each week. So if you're into that kind of thing, Friday the 13th, the series may be for you after all. So there's that. But all right, next video, I'm probably going to do the Batman franchise. I know some of you are like, why not Nightmare on Elm Street? But I'm just going to say because I'm Batman. So, yeah, that's why.